I was 16 when this story happened. I was born in Jamaica, so I was not used to the lockdown procedure in the US. One normal day of school, in my first week of being in the States, I asked to go to the bathroom, and my professor, Mr. Scott, agreed. So I opened the door and left. I was doing my business in the stall when I heard the alarm going off. I thought it was the fire alarm until I heard the principal talk over the speaker. I knew English, but the announcement was just too fast. The only thing I could understand was 3 intruders. I thought about leaving, but if there were actually intruders, I better be in a safe place, so I just kept hiding inside the stall. I waited a few minutes and then heard the bathroom door opening, followed by footsteps that stopped in front of every stall for a few seconds, but kept going to the next one. Though when it reached mine, I didn't hear the person leaving. I covered my mouth so they wouldn't know I was there. Yes, I was that scared. Moments later, I heard a man's voice. He said he knew I was inside and that he was there to hide from the intruder as well. I left the stall and greeted the guy. He seemed to be both nice and suspicious at the same time, if you know what I mean. We waited there for 10 minutes when he told me it was already safe and to follow him outside. I was afraid he was one of the intruders, but if I didn't comply, I'd probably be dead. So I just followed him. There was no one in the hall, so I told him this and asked if it wasn't safer to just go back inside the bathroom or any other hiding spot for that matter, since apparently the lockdown had not ended yet. He took some time to answer, but ended up agreeing, telling me he knew a better hiding spot and to just keep following him. He was walking a little bit in front of me, so I decided to look at him from top to bottom to see if I could see any weapon when I noticed a gun in his holster. I slowed down my pace in a way he wouldn't notice and just walked backwards slowly until he looked at me. Only then did I sprint back. As soon as I did, though, I heard him yell for me to get back there or he'd shoot me. I just called it a bluff and kept running until I reached the end of the hall, so I had to turn to either the left or the right. I decided to go with my gut and go to the left. After doing so, I stopped hearing footsteps behind me, though now there were 5 armed guys standing 20 feet ahead, pointing their guns at me. There were at least 6 of them, rather than the 3 that we had been told over the speaker. One of them yelled for me to get down, while the others were beside him, all still pointing their guns at me. I asked them to please not kill me, and the same guy repeated for me to get down, or he'd shoot me, though this time louder. I got down on the floor, and they all came near me, and I got handcuffed. They were cops. They pulled me up and started directing me to what seemed to be the exit, but not without telling me what a piece of shit I was for doing what I was doing. I replied, saying that it was all a misunderstanding and that I was a student there. He asked me for my hall pass, and I denied having it. I didn't even know what that was. The other officer told me to shut up, implying that I was making my case worse. While he was saying that, I heard one of the other officers talking over the radio, stating that they had the last intruder. I was escorted outside, where there were at least 20 police cars surrounding the school and 2 helicopters. After trying a bunch of times, I finally convinced one of the police officers to call my professor to come outside so they could speak with him. He asked me what his name was, and I told him. By this time, I would do anything to prove my innocence. I was standing against one of the police cars when the lockdown alarm turned off, signaling the end of the lockdown. I stood there, waiting to see what would happen, when I saw my professor, Mr. Scott, come outside through the main door. He asked the cops why I was being detained, and the officers replied, saying that I was one of the 7 intruders that had invaded the school. He then said that it was all a mistake, and that I had just asked to go to the bathroom when the alarm went off. He also said that due to school policy, even if I had shown up to the door, he couldn't let me in. After a few more hours of interrogation, they finally let me go, though not without a warning. Later on, I found out that the guy who was with me in the bathroom was one of the intruders. He used to study there, and for some reason decided to invade the school with 6 of his friends, 4 of whom had also attended that school. They all got arrested. I am so thankful I was not shot by either him or the cops. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here telling you this story. I am an elementary school teacher, 3rd grade to be exact. This story happened last year while my class was taking a test. Jeremy, one of my students, asked me if he could go to the bathroom as he had been holding it in for an hour. Jeremy was such a kind kid. He was one of the smartest ones of his classmates and had never gotten in any trouble, so I agreed and let him go. A few minutes passed, and Jeremy hadn't come back. I started getting worried, so I went outside for a second to call for a janitor. The janitor, Chris, came back, and I asked him if he would go into the bathroom and search for Jeremy while I went back inside the classroom to monitor my students. A few more minutes passed, and someone knocked on the door. It was Chris. He told me he went to every bathroom in the hall but couldn't find Jeremy, so I asked him if he could monitor my students for a while I would go talk with the principal about the disappearance. He kindly agreed, and I went on my way to the principal's office. The principal, Mr. John, said he would take a look at what he could do, though he quickly said the best thing he could do is say something over the school speaker, which he did. I got a little bit relieved knowing that the whole school knew about this and would help find him. I left and went back to my classroom, and still, no sign of Jeremy whatsoever. 15 minutes later, the lockdown alarm rang. I was praying it was a drill, but I quickly noticed it wasn't when the hall lights turned off. The school was actually going into lockdown. I told my students to forget the test, stating that I would reschedule it to next week and to go sit in the corner of the room while I locked the door and windows. They complied better than I thought. In fact, they made absolutely zero noise during the process. After locking everything and sitting near my students, one of them, his best friend, whispered to me asking about Jeremy. I didn't know what to tell him other than the truth. He started getting worried, and so did I. Everything was passing through my head about what could have happened to Jeremy. I couldn't stop thinking that if anything bad happened to this kid, I was the one to blame, and that I would never forgive myself for letting him go to the bathroom. 5 minutes of waiting in the corner of the room, I heard footsteps in the hall, followed by the doorknob to the classroom turning. Luckily, it was locked. I questioned if I should go and ask who it was. Maybe it was Jeremy. I had already messed up once, letting him go to the bathroom. I was not going to mess up again, leaving the poor child outside during a lockdown. I stood up from the floor and directed myself to the locked door, asking who it was. Jeremy took some time to answer, but finally said, "Hey miss, it's me. I was in the bathroom when suddenly the lockdown alarm went off. Please let me in." I found that situation very weird. Why would he say miss but not my name? Also, who's me? Why would he not identify himself? The bathroom part seemed on point since he left to go there. However, other than the voice sounding shaky and scared, which would be normal, the voice was higher than usual. I quickly put the pieces together and realized it was not Jeremy's voice. I could tell it was a man, forcing his voice to sound higher. I didn't reply to whatever he said after that, and just went back to the corner of the room where my students were sitting. Seconds later, I could hear pounding against the door. I stood there without saying a word, trying to calm myself down. On the other side, my students were panicking, leading some of them to start crying. Due to the crying, the man pounded harder against the door, yelling for me to open the door. I ignored him, and soon enough, the pounding stopped. Complete silence other than the alarm in the background. Around 20 minutes later, the alarm stopped, and we were notified of the end of the lockdown. I later found out that Jeremy had a really bad stomachache, making him stand longer in the bathroom. When he was washing his hands, getting ready to leave, the lockdown alarm went off. Seconds later, an old man entered the bathroom. He started asking Jeremy if he was also hiding from the lockdown, to which Jeremy agreed. The man also asked what classroom Jeremy was having classes at, as well as my name, and to my disbelief, he answered every single question. A few questions later, the man left the bathroom without saying anything or why, and went outside to where I assumed to be my classroom's door. The man was arrested a few days later under the influence of drugs in a nearby bar, close to the school. Why he did it is still unknown to me. I was sitting in English class, bored out of my mind when the intercom crackled to life.
Attention, students and staff. We are entering lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Please follow lockdown procedures and remain calm.
I rolled my eyes. I had never been in a real-life lockdown. The only close experience I had was with all the drills we had. To give you an idea, we had 3 lockdown drills that month, and I thought this was the 4th. In a way, I was happy it was real, but on the other hand, I was scared. You know how teens are. I don't know why I would be happy with that scenario, but if you were in my place, you'd probably be too, due to the surreal amount of lockdown drills we had. At least that was real. I used to think those drills were pointless and stupid since our school never had a real lockdown scenario. But when the principal said over the speaker that it was not a drill, I got goosebumps. The teacher locked the door and turned off the lights. We all moved to the corner of the room, away from the windows, and sat on the floor. The teacher came to sit with us and suggested barricading the door to stop any possible break-in. My classmates were indecisive. Some said it was better to barricade it, and some said it was better to leave it be. One of the arguments against barricading it was because we were the 3rd closest room from the main door, so it would make a lot of noise. As we couldn't decide, the teacher chose to barricade it, and so we helped him out. About the noise, the siren was literally above our classroom's door, and thanks to how noisy it was, we just hoped whoever was outside wouldn't be able to hear us. The lockdown seemed to be taking forever, but it was probably only a few minutes when we heard a loud siren. It was the fire alarm. I felt a surge of confusion and fear, and when I looked around at my classmates, I could tell they were too. Why was the fire alarm going off during a lockdown? Was there a fire? Or was it a trick? A trap? A way to lure us out of the classroom and into the hallways where someone was waiting to shoot us? I looked at the teacher, hoping he would tell us what to do, but he looked as confused and scared as we were. He grabbed his phone and tried to call the office, but there was no answer. He tried to call the principal, the vice principal, and the security guard, anyone who could tell us what was going on. But no one picked up. He cursed under his breath and put his phone away. He looked at us and said, "I don't know what's happening, kids. I don't know if this is a real fire or a false alarm, but we have to make a decision. We can either stay here and hope that it's a false alarm and that the intruder did it so we would leave the classroom, or we can evacuate and hope that it's not a trap. Either way, we're taking a risk. I can't make this decision for you. You have to decide for yourselves. What do you want to do?" Once again, we were all an indecisive class, and so we asked the teacher what we should do, but he said he couldn't choose for us. As no one stepped forward, we decided to wait and see what would happen. We waited, and waited until one of my friends, John, said he could see smoke entering through the gaps in the door. We started unbarricading it, and when we finally did and opened the door, we couldn't see anything out there. There was smoke everywhere, not to mention the heat there was. We couldn't go through, and we couldn't jump out the window either, due to how high we were. We were screwed. The only thing we could do was pray. We were all panicking, though minutes later, the teacher alerted us that he heard a siren right outside the window. We all went to investigate, and we quickly realized it was a fire truck. The firefighter below told us that he was going to activate the ladder, and that he was going to bring us down, one by one following the alphabetical order. My name is Z, so you know I was last, or at least I was going to be if my teacher didn't offer to be last. Everyone went down, and when it was my turn, half the classroom had smoke in it. Luckily, everyone got out of that intact. Turns out that the lockdown alarm was triggered by a student who, during his trip to the bathroom, went to the security room and triggered the lockdown alarm. If you are wondering about the principal talking over the intercom as he heard the lockdown alarm, he immediately warned the school as a result of it being an act-quick situation.